I thought that making something simple and sentimental would be a great place to start for this project. But it challenged me way more than I expected, and honestly, almost made me give up. How hard could it be? A couple of miter joints, a glue up or two, some sanding? I had no idea how complicated things were about to get. I didn't want this to be just another shop project. I wanted to make something personal, and that had purpose. But I also wanted to test my capabilities up to this point. When I was a kid, my grandpa had bought me a whittling kit, so I wanted to make him something that I could give back. The plan was simple. Cut up a few panels, glue them together, cut off the top. Easy enough. I knew that accuracy and consistency were going to be the most important factors for this entire build. But I got excited, and due to some slight shop limitations, I threw consistency out the window immediately. I did understand that I'd probably make a mistake here or there, so I did have a plan for minor fixes. After getting the board cut up into the rough pieces of the box, I began picking out which pieces I wanted to be the top or the face based on the grain pattern, shape, or direction. I then marked which panel would go where. I cut each panel oversized, hoping that I could more accurately sneak up on the final dimensions later. I made sure that every measurement or fence adjustment was done as precise as possible, knowing that the pieces had to come together at some point. And honestly, up to this point, I was feeling pretty good about the whole thing. My confidence was high, my excitement was rising, but there was a lot more yet to come. For the accent piece, I decided to go with this super dark wingy wood. I thought it would contrast well against the maple, but I also got a lot of comments about what to do with it, so I wanted to save as much of it as possible for the future. And being in that mindset is where I made my first mistake. This first piece that I cut would fit perfectly along the top and front face of the box, like I had planned. I quickly realized that I need a lot more for the accent that runs along the top and the two sides though. So like I should have done in the first place, I ended up having to break out the track saw. Luckily, it was only about an inch of material that I needed, so hopefully in the future I can build something along the lines of what you guys commented. There's a few of them that I really enjoyed. Since I don't have an actual track saw, I was a little nervous about the accuracy, but this jig worked out pretty well. I finally got at least kind of wise, and for the cuts that mattered, I went ahead and added a stop block. And with problem number 1 solved, it was time to cut these boards for the first glue up. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention to my camera battery, so it ended up dying when I was gluing up the top of the box. But it's all the same process, right? Not like I lost my favorite or most satisfying footage or anything. Not salty at all. I definitely wanted to make sure and be careful during this process and not go light on the glue. Number 1, because it was cold in the garage, so I didn't want the wood to warp or pull away from the joints. And number 2, because I knew that I was going to put these boards through more of a beating later on. While they were drying, I spent the next day or so trying to figure out how I was going to square up all the edges. I don't have a lot of room in my garage, and I definitely can't afford a joiner at this point. So I did a little bit of YouTube research, and I built myself a joining jig. And honestly, I think it works pretty well. Although, I do think I'm going to end up rebuilding it and making it a little bit nicer. If you'd like to see me do that, or if you'd like me to post a how-to, let me know in the comments. Next, it was time to trim off all the excess and work my way towards my final dimensions. Little did I know that this would come back to bite me, and we'll get to why soon. And after this, I finally got to play with my new tool. These boards were way too thick for the size of the box that I was building, so I planed them all down to about a 1/2 inch thick. This process definitely took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but since this planer is new to me, I didn't want to overdo it by trying to take off too much wood at once, so I only ended up taking off like a 30-second at a time. The silver lining being that I got to film it from a bunch of different angles. But this is where things really started to fall apart. On dry fit number 1, I was happy with how things were. It was looking like things were going to come together smoothly. But what I hadn't realized is that leaving on all that excess from earlier probably would have helped me for the next cut. I don't totally know what happened, but what I can tell you is that I had no idea how to aim these miter cuts. I ended up just sneaking up to the final dimension that I needed, but in doing so, I took off way more material than I had planned for. And I really feel like I did my best to try to account for this, but we'll see come the next dry fit just how wrong I was. My goal was to joint the box using miter cuts because I prefer the look of an uninterrupted grain pattern as much as possible. I know I could have tried dovetails or something similar. There's just something about it. And honestly, I still don't think I know how to line up these angled cuts. So if you've got it, I'd really appreciate the feedback. And to be completely honest, this was the point in the project that I started to get really frustrated with myself and with how things were turning out. I'm definitely a perfectionist, so when things aren't quite going to plan, or things aren't turning out how I imagined them, it honestly just really gets under my skin, and I am by far my own worst critic. You'll notice as I'm fitting these pieces together that there's gaps in some areas, and some pieces are taller or shorter than others, and overall, it just doesn't fit right. I don't think I had a single joint that lined up perfectly. But I had spent too much time, too much effort, and honestly a lot of wood to get to this point, so I wasn't about to back down now. So I went ahead and glued it all up in hopes that future me could fix this. But I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little bit too hard on myself. I honestly want to hear your thoughts. If you were making this for somebody important in your life, what would matter more to you? Would it be the perfect outcome or the story behind it? Here's where some of those gaps and imperfections show best. It's also where I start to lose faith in my ability to fix it. But I'm going to do everything in my power to not have to start completely over. The more time I put into this though, the harder it becomes to walk away. As a last ditch effort, I ran this on my table saw where the fence was set to where I would only cut off a little bit of the box at a time. I didn't end up recording it because I wasn't completely positive it was going to work. But it worked out enough to be able to glue up the last panel. So here we are moving forward. At this point, we're in the final stretch. I'm going to do everything in my power to salvage this box. First step is trimming away the excess on the bottom panel. And once that's done, I'll go ahead and take this over to my table saw and cut off what'll end up being the lid from the full box. Like this. I saw this technique used on a YouTube video once, and I figured that this would be a lot easier than miter jointing everything. And had everything else gone smoother, I think it's a great way to do it. And now, we officially have ourselves a box. I really needed to find a solution to that end grain that you see on the bottom panel. I think what I came up with ended up working out great. I added these Paduke accent pieces to the corner, kind of as a test, kind of for looks, but also just to practice with it. I think they added a good bit of character to the whole thing and kind of took away from some of the other imperfections. After solving for the most part the issue of the gaps on the top of the box, I was really excited to continue on with the project. I had a couple of other ideas on how to fix everything else, and I just wanted to get to that point. I definitely felt like I was at a point where I was just trying to salvage everything I could, and the more that I worked on it, the more things just kind of started to come together. I had originally planned to round out the entire box for a more organic look, and I think that that was a great way to hide this end grain right here. As it started to take shape, it became easier to look past the flaws and more so at what was going right, which was honestly really encouraging, and I was going to need that going into the sanding portion of this because it took me forever. Starting with 80 grit sandpaper, I knocked down all of the high spots that I could. I added glue in some of the creases and sanded over it to try to hide them. I made sure to make every edge as smooth and as round as I could. And then I worked my way up through 120 and 200 and 220 to get the smoothest finish I possibly could. The more I sanded, the more I started liking this thing. There were really only two problems in the end that I couldn't solve. The first one was I wanted the lid to attach by magnets. I ended up ordering magnets that were a little bit too small, and through all of my fixing of previous issues, I couldn't line all four of them up perfectly. In the end though, 3 of the 4 of them line up and have a decent enough hold, but I figured that would be okay, since in reality it's just gonna sit there and look pretty. Instead of trying to measure where the magnets were gonna go, I stacked 2 of them together and I marked where I needed to drill perfectly. All that was left now was glue down the magnets and go ahead and add my favorite finish to this thing. My final problem, although a little bit less of a big deal, was that there was just a little bit of glue squeeze out left on the inside of the box. I did what I could to get most of it out, but I didn't quite have the tools to get into the corners, nor did I really know how to deal with it. In the end, I'm actually pretty pleased with how this turned out. It has some flaws, sure, but I know that I'm a beginner, and I know that for this gift, the thought and the process does count for a little bit more than the outcome. But let me know what you think of the final reveal. See you next time.